There was a pine table in our kitchen, no cloth, scarred from years of meals I cooked 3 times a day. I want to be precise about that. 3 times, every day, from the week we married. The night I was 7 months pregnant and too sick to stand, my husband came inside at 5:30, the way he always did, and sat down at that table. I could hear the chair from the bedroom, the creak, then nothing. No plates, no prayer. 4 minutes, I've counted it back since, and then his boots, his hat, the door. He walked to his mother's house. The table stayed empty. That table is where this investigation begins. I've been laying this evidence out piece by piece. The table, his hands, the sentence, the silence, the number I carried for years. My case, my kitchen. But before I open the rest of this investigation, I need to tell you that my name is Emma, and this is Emma the Amish Soul. And if this evidence feels familiar to you, if you've ever counted something you couldn't name and held it against yourself, I need you here for what comes next. Subscribe. Stay with this case. If this work of remembering and telling matters to you, you can support it through Super Chat or membership. It keeps me gathering. Now, the next piece of evidence is the one that proved this was never just my story. I need to walk you through something I spent years trying to understand. Not just remember, understand. There is a difference between carrying a memory and investigating it, and I know the difference now because I have done both. For a long time, I carried what happened during my first pregnancy the way you carry a stone in your coat pocket. Always there, always heavy, never examined. Then one afternoon in a therapist's office, a word I had never heard cracked the case wide open, and I realized I had been investigating the wrong thing. I thought I was looking for what my husband did wrong. The evidence pointed somewhere else entirely, somewhere I was not prepared to go. The first piece of evidence is the table. Pine, rectangular, no tablecloth. We did not use one. The surface was scored with knife marks from years of cutting bread directly on the wood, which is how we did it. My husband built that table the month before our wedding with lumber from his father's barn. I served every meal on it for 4 years, 3 meals a day. I want you to hold that number, 3. That table was not furniture. It was my workstation, my proof of usefulness, the place where I demonstrated every single day that I was worth the space I occupied in that house. When I stopped being able to stand at the stove, the table became something else. Evidence. The evening that begins this investigation, I was 7 months along and had not kept food down in 11 days. I was in the bedroom. Our bedroom was 6 steps from the kitchen. I counted those 2. Lying on a quilt that smelled like cedar and something sour I will not name. I heard the door open at 5:30. His boots on the pine floor, the scrape of the chair being pulled out. He sat down. I waited. He waited. The kitchen was silent in the specific way a room is silent when something that should be happening is not. 4 minutes. I have reconstructed this from memory, checked it against the rhythm of the clock that hung above the stove. 4 minutes. Then the chair pushed back, the hat off the hook, the door. He walked to his mother's house. It was a 1/4 mile down the lane. She would have had supper on her table already. She always did, 6 children still at home. He did not tell me he was going. He did not ask if I needed anything before he left. I want to be careful here, because the easy reading of this evidence is that he was cold or careless, and neither of those is true. What is true is this: it did not occur to him to make his own meal. Not because he was cruel, because no one, not his mother, not the church, not the culture that shaped every hour of his life, had ever suggested that feeding himself was something he would need to know how to do. That absence is the first exhibit. The second exhibit is his hands. I need to describe them because they are evidence of something I did not understand for years. His hands were enormous and scarred, a long white line across the left palm from a chisel that slipped when he was 16. Calluses so thick on his fingers they cracked and bled in winter. Those hands could harness a draft horse. They built our house. They laid fence for 3 farms in one summer. One morning during my 3rd trimester, I watched from the bedroom doorway as he tried to make coffee. He stood in front of the 3 tin canisters on the counter, flour, sugar, coffee, and opened each one before finding the right one. He could not locate the matches, though they sat in the same tin cup beside the stove where they had always been. 8 feet by 12. That was the size of our kitchen. He had eaten over 4,000 meals in that room. It was a foreign country to him. I need you to understand what that proves. It would be easy to call this incompetence, but it was something more structural. That kitchen was my jurisdiction, the way the barn was his. I would no sooner have hitched the plow team than he would have known which jar held the baking soda. The wall between his world and mine was not built by one decision. It was built by 1,000 mornings of me saying, "I'll get it," and him sitting down. It was built by his mother before me and her mother before her, each woman absorbing the kitchen into her identity so completely that the room itself became gendered. I am not describing a marriage. I am describing architecture. And when my body failed, the architecture had no contingency. There was no plan for a wife who could not stand. The third exhibit is a sentence, 13 words. His mother said them to me during a visit when I was bedridden at 7 months, my face damp, a bowl beside the bed. She sat on the edge of the mattress, patted my hand, and said, "I had 9, and I never missed a supper." She smiled when she said it, not unkindly, with pride even. I have turned those 13 words over for years, the way you turn a document over, looking for the watermark. 9 pregnancies, 0 missed suppers. She was not offering me sympathy. She was offering me a standard. And the standard said, "What you are experiencing is not illness. It is insufficient will." I wonder now, I have wondered for a decade, whether she was telling the truth. Whether she really never lay in a bed and felt the room tilt, or whether she did and simply never allowed herself the word for it. That question, what did the women before me endure and refuse to name, is the lead I followed next, and it went cold. I asked my mother. She visited once during the worst of it, stood in the doorway of the bedroom with her arms crossed over her apron. I asked her directly, "Were you ever this sick with us?" Her face shifted. I saw it. Something behind her eyes. A flicker. A door opening. Her mouth opened. 1 full second of nothing. Then she said, "You'll be fine. Pray about it." I asked again 2 years later. I asked my aunt. I asked a cousin who had borne 7 children in 8 years. The pattern was identical every time. A hesitation, a near admission, then a door closing gently in my face. I was not finding silence. I was finding a system that taught women to seal their own testimony shut. My mother's mouth opening and closing is not a gap in the evidence. It is the evidence. I carried those exhibits, the table, the hands, the sentence, the silence, for years without knowing they were connected. But there was one more piece I need to show you before this investigation goes wider. I counted the meals, not intentionally, not on paper, but my body kept a tally the way a body keeps a scar. 61. That was the number of suppers I did not cook during my pregnancy. I know this because I went back later and counted the weeks I was sick and multiplied, and then subtracted the nights he ate at his mother's and the 2 nights a neighbor brought food. And the number that remained, the meals no one made, The evenings my family went without a proper supper because I could not stand, was 61. I did not count that number as evidence of my suffering. I counted it as evidence of my failure. 61 times I could not do the only thing the world had told me I was for. I carried that number the way I carried the nausea, in my body, without a name. The evidence I have shown you so far belongs to one kitchen, one table, one woman. I held it that way for years, my private collection of things I could not explain. But investigations turn when you find the same evidence in someone else's hands, and the turn in mine came with a phrase I heard at a church gathering 3 months before we left the community. I had mentioned to the bishop's wife, quietly, between hymns, that I was struggling to keep up with my duties. I did not say I was sick. I said struggling. She touched my arm the way you would touch a child who has scraped a knee, and she said, "Idle hands are the devil's workshop." She said it with warmth. That is what I need you to hear. She was not punishing me. She was fluent in the only language the system had built for a woman who had stopped working. That language contained no word for ill. It contained only idle. I met a woman named Ruth 3 years after we left. Different state, different settlement. Hers was stricter than mine. Swartzentruber, deep Missouri. We were at a gathering for people who had come out, and she told her story the way I have been telling mine, carefully, with her hands flat on the table as though holding the memory still. She was pregnant with her fourth, so sick she fainted twice in 1 week, once at the stove, once on the porch steps. Her husband did not walk to his mother's house for 1 meal. He moved there. 3 weeks. He packed a bag and walked down the road and lived in his childhood bedroom while his pregnant wife lay alone in their house. He visited daily. He checked the animals. He brought her nothing. I asked her to repeat that because I needed to be sure. He brought her nothing. Not because he was heartless, because bringing things to a sick woman, soup, water, a cool cloth, that was women's work, and there were no women available to do it. Ruth told me the rest, and I felt my hands go cold against the tabletop. When the baby came, the Maud arrived the following morning, a girl, 15, sent by the church to cook and clean and tend the older children. For 3 weeks, Ruth had lain alone in that house, too sick to stand, and no one came. The day after the baby was born, help materialized as though it had been waiting in the wings. I knew that sequence. I knew it in my body before I knew it in my mind, because the same thing had happened to me. No Maud during the months I was bedridden, and then a girl at the door the morning after delivery, cheerful, rolling up her sleeves. The system had a plan for a woman who had just given birth. It had no plan for a woman who was just sick. Ruth's case and mine, laid side by side, proved the same structural finding. Pregnancy illness was not a category. It was an inconvenience the woman was expected to absorb until the baby arrived and the real work of recovery could begin. I have been handling this carefully, laying evidence on the table the way you lay out documents, edges aligned, everything measured. But there is a piece I have been circling since the beginning of this investigation, and I cannot hold it at arm's length anymore. I need to go back into the room, not to examine it, to be in it. The bedroom. The quilt with the cedar smell gone sour. The clock above the stove ticking through the wall. I am lying on my left side because lying on my right makes the nausea worse. The light is going amber through the window because it is autumn and the sun sets early and no one has lit the lamp. I hear him come in. I hear the boots. I hear the chair, and I hear my own voice. This is the part I have never laid out before, and I need to say it plainly because it is the center of everything I have been investigating. He walks past the bedroom door on his way to the kitchen, and I say it. From the bed, from my back, with my eyes closed and my hand on my stomach, and every ounce of energy I have left in my body funneled into 5 words. I say, I'm sorry about supper. I said it. I was the one who was sick. I was the one who had not eaten in 2 days. I was the one whose body was failing at the single task the world had assigned me, and I apologized to the man walking past my door on his way to an empty table. I am sorry about supper. I won't describe what came after. Some evidence you carry in your body, you do not present it. But I need you to hold those 5 words, because they contain every exhibit I have shown you: the table, the hands, the count, the sentence, the silence, the idle hands, all of it compressed into an apology I made from a bed I could not leave, for a meal I could not cook, to a man who could not feed himself. That was the system working. That was its finest product. A woman so thoroughly convinced of her own failure that she apologized for being ill. I sat in a therapist's office 4 years later, outside in a town with stoplights and a grocery store, and a world that looked nothing like the one I had left. And I was describing my pregnancies, expecting her to nod the way people nod when you tell a hard story. She did not nod. She leaned forward. She said a word I had never heard: Hyperemesis Gravidarum. I asked her to spell it. She did. She said it was a recognized medical condition, severe, persistent, sometimes dangerous nausea during pregnancy. She said it was treatable. She said it was not a failure of will or prayer or character. She said the word again, slower, and I felt something shift behind my sternum, like a locked door opening from the inside. That word reclassified everything. Every meal I counted, every apology I made, every 13-word sentence delivered with a smile. I was not a woman who could not keep up. I was a woman with a medical condition that has a name, a literature, a treatment protocol, and I had lived inside a world that had no word for it, so it used the only words it knew: idle, faithless, soft. I expected this investigation to end with an indictment of the system, and it does. But the unexpected finding, the one I was not looking for, is about him. My husband was not a villain. The evidence does not support that verdict. He was a man the system had built without the capacity to care for a sick wife, the way it had built me without the capacity to rest without guilt. The same architecture that told me idle hands belonged to the devil told him that soup was women's work, that a cool cloth on a forehead was women's work, that sitting beside a sick person and asking what they needed was, all of it, women's work. He could build a barn in 6 days. He could not boil an egg. And that was not his failure. It was his training. Years later, outside, I was pregnant again. I heard him in the kitchen, something burning. He came to the bedroom door holding a plate with 2 pieces of blackened toast, and he stood there and he said, I don't know how to do this right. I looked at his face and I saw every piece of evidence I had gathered. The table, the chair, the walk to his mother's. And I saw it reclassified. Not cruelty, not indifference. A man trying to learn a language no one had ever spoken to him. The toast was burned. He brought it anyway. I ate it. I hold that evidence without resolving it. Because the honest end of an investigation is not always a clean verdict. I love the man who brought burned toast. I grieve the years he sat at an empty table and walked away. I miss the world that taught me to make bread before I was 10 and set a table in the dark and find the flour without looking. The world that made me competent and industrious and proud of my hands. The same world that looked at those hands lying still on a quilt and called them idle. I cannot separate the beauty from the wound, I have tried. The evidence will not allow it. There is a table in my kitchen now. A different kitchen, a different life. Some evenings I sit at it and do nothing. No meal in front of me, no supper on the stove. I sit in the quiet, and I am not idle. I am not faithless. I am not failing. I am resting, which is a word I had to learn from the outside, because the inside never taught it. If you have ever apologized for being sick, if those words came out of your mouth while your body was the one suffering, this evidence is yours too. If you counted the meals or the loads of laundry or the days you could not rise, and held that number as proof of your own insufficiency, I see your ledger. If your mother opened her mouth and then closed it, if the older women offered you endurance instead of medicine, if the help arrived only after the baby did, and you understood quietly that you were never the one the system was protecting, then you have been conducting your own investigation, whether you called it that or not. I see you. I see the evidence you have been carrying. And I need to tell you the verdict I found at the end of mine, because it belongs to you as much as it belongs to me. You were not the woman who could not keep up. You were never that woman. You were sick, in a world that had no word for your sickness. And you survived it, and the surviving was never the bare minimum. It was everything. What Amish husbands do when their wives are too sick to work is what the system built them to do. They wait at an empty table, and then they leave. Not because they do not love you, because no one ever taught love to cook.